Wait, before you scroll past this, I need you to understand something. This isn't just another sad animal story. This is about what happens when the world breaks something innocent, and that broken thing still chooses love. By the end, you'll understand why a dying creature's final act will haunt you forever, and why the person it saved will never, ever be the same. Stay with me, because the truth of what really happened that night changes everything. The dog had no name, not anymore. Once perhaps when it was younger, when its eyes still held that bright, foolish hope that all puppies carry. Someone might have called it something. Buddy maybe, or Max. One of those simple, affectionate names humans give to creatures they promise to love forever. But that was before the man who first took it home decided a dog was too much responsibility. Before it was left tied to a post outside a gas station in the middle of summer, water bowl empty, the metal chain cutting into its neck as it waited for someone who would never return. Before the teenager found it wandering near the highway and thought it would be funny to throw rocks. Before the couple who briefly sheltered it decided their landlord's no pets policy mattered more than the creature sleeping trustingly at the foot of their bed. Before the shelter worker, exhausted and underfunded, looked at its matted fur and infected paw and marked it down as unadoptable. Before it learned that the world was not a kind place. Now it had no name, just a body that kept moving, kept surviving, kept searching for something it could no longer remember. Food, warmth, safety, the simple animal needs that had become its entire existence. It limped through the streets of a city that had forgotten how to see it. People passed by, hundreds of them every day, and their eyes slid over the dog like it was part of the pavement. Invisible, irrelevant, a problem to step around, not a life to acknowledge. Sometimes a child would notice, would point and say, "Mommy, that dog looks hurt." And the mother would pull the child's hand a little tighter and say, "Don't touch it, sweetie. It might have diseases." The dog learned not to approach people directly, learned that eye contact often meant a kick, a shout, a thrown can. It kept its head low and its body small, trying to take up as little space as possible in a world that had made it clear there was no space for it at all. Its ribs showed through its fur. One ear was torn from a fight with another stray over a discarded hamburger wrapper. Its right hind leg dragged slightly, the result of a car that hadn't bothered to stop. But it survived. Day after day, night after night, it survived. Not because it wanted to. The dog no longer understood want. It simply continued. The way a river continues to flow, the way a heart continues to beat, the way life persists even when it has every reason not to. It slept in alleys, behind dumpsters, under bridges where the rain couldn't reach. It ate garbage, fought off bigger dogs for scraps, drank from puddles that tasted of oil and rust, and it watched humans. From a distance, always from a distance. It watched them laugh with each other, watched them hold hands, watched them lean down to pet other dogs, clean dogs, loved dogs, dogs with collars and names and homes to return to. Something old and buried stirred in the dog's chest when it saw those things. A ghost of a feeling it used to know. A memory of being touched gently, of being wanted. But that ghost was fading. The dog was dying, not dramatically, not all at once. Just the slow, grinding way that forgotten things die. A little more tired each day. A little more hungry. A little less able to run when danger came. It had stopped hoping for rescue. Animals don't hope the way humans do. They simply endure until they can't anymore. And the dog knew in the way animals know these things, that it was running out of time. The woman had been thinking about it for 3 weeks. Not constantly, not dramatically, just steadily. The way you think about a dentist appointment you're dreading, or a conversation you know you need to have but keep postponing. She had researched methods, read forums, written notes, deleted them, written them again. She had stood on the bridge twice before, late at night when the city was quiet and no one would see. Had looked down at the water below, at the darkness that promised an end to the exhausting weight of simply existing. She had told herself she was just looking, just considering, just exploring the option. But she knew the truth. She was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. The kind that lives in your bones. The kind that makes every breath feel like effort. Every day feel like an obstacle course you no longer have the strength to run. She was 34 years old. She had a job she hated, an apartment she could barely afford, a family that had stopped calling after she missed Christmas for the third year in a row. She had friends once, but depression is efficient at trimming away connections until you're left with nothing but the weight of your own thoughts. She had tried therapy, medication, meditation, exercise, journaling, all the things the internet promised would help. Some of them did for a while, but the relief never lasted. The darkness always came back, heavier than before, like a tide that kept rising no matter how high she built her walls. She was exhausted from trying, exhausted from pretending she was fine, from forcing smiles at work, from crafting social media posts that suggested a life worth living, from the sheer relentless performance of being a functional human being when all she wanted was to stop. Just stop. The decision, when it finally crystallized, came with a strange sense of relief, like setting down a heavy suitcase you'd been carrying for miles, like finally admitting a truth you'd been avoiding. She wrote the note on a Tuesday evening, kept it simple, apologized to people who probably wouldn't read it, left instructions for her landlord, her boss, her student loans. She scheduled the email to send in 24 hours. That gave her one more day, one more rotation of the earth, one more chance to feel. What? She didn't know. Nothing, probably. But there was a ritual to it, a finality that felt important. She spent that last day doing ordinary things. She cleaned her apartment, did her laundry, paid her bills, as if these mundane acts could somehow balance the enormity of what she was planning, as if leaving her life tidy would make her death less messy. She didn't cry. She had cried enough. Now there was just a numb, hollow calm, the way the air feels right before a storm. As evening fell, she put on her coat. She didn't take anything with her. No phone, no wallet, no identification. She didn't want to be found. Didn't want anyone to have to make that call, arrange that funeral, stand over that grave pretending she had been happy. She wanted to disappear, completely, to become one more missing person whose story eventually stops being searched for. The bridge was a 20-minute walk from her apartment. She had chosen it carefully, high enough, isolated enough. The water below was deep and cold and fast-moving. People had jumped before. She had read about them. They were never pulled out alive. The night was cold, November cold, the kind that bites through your coat and makes your breath visible. The city hummed around her, indifferent and eternal. Cars passed. People walked by, absorbed in their phones. No one looked at her. She preferred it that way. She reached the bridge at just past 9 o'clock. The pedestrian walkway was empty. Streetlights cast long yellow shadows. Below, the river moved like black glass, reflecting nothing. She walked to the midpoint, placed her hands on the railing. The metal was so cold it hurt to touch. This was it. She climbed up. Her legs shook, not from fear but from the simple physical strain of pulling herself onto the narrow ledge. Her heart pounded, but her mind was quiet, clear. She had made her choice. She looked down. The drop was longer than she had imagined. The water looked impossibly far away. For a moment, a tiny animal part of her brain screamed in protest. Survival instinct, raw and primal, begging her to step back. She ignored it. She closed her eyes. She let go. The dog had been sleeping under the bridge, not because it was a good spot. The wind cut through the space beneath the concrete, and the ground was damp and cold, but it was hidden, and hidden meant safe. It had learned to sleep lightly, to wake at the smallest sound. Survival depended on it. So when the footsteps started across the bridge above, the dog's eyes opened. It lay still, listening. One person, walking slowly, then stopping. The dog waited. Experience had taught it that human stopping meant different things. Sometimes they were smoking. Sometimes they were on the phone. Sometimes they were looking for something to throw at creatures like it. But this felt different. The footsteps had stopped, directly above where the dog lay. And there was something about the quality of the silence that followed. Something heavy, something wrong. The dog lifted its head, and then it heard the sound. A small, choked gasp, the scrape of shoes against metal, and then nothing. The dog knew that sound. It had heard it before, in the shelter, in the pound, in the moments before an animal stopped, struggling, the sound of something giving up. It stood. Its bad leg protested, but it ignored the pain. It limped out from under the bridge, out into the open where the streetlights reached. It looked up. At first, it couldn't understand what it was seeing. A shape on the railing, a person standing where people didn't stand, swaying slightly, silhouetted against the night sky, and then the shape moved, tipped forward, began to fall. The dog didn't think. Animals don't think the way humans do, don't weigh consequences or calculate risks. They simply act. It ran, faster than it had run in months, its broken body screaming in protest, but something deeper, something older than pain, older than fear, drove it forward. The woman fell, and the dog, impossibly, absurdly, leapt, not into the water. It couldn't have reached the water, but into the air, into the space between the bridge and the river, barking. A sound it hadn't made in so long it barely recognized its own voice. The sound shattered the silence. The woman's eyes flew open. She was falling. The world was rushing past her. The bridge, the lights, the sky, all blurring together. Her stomach lurched. Her mind, so calm, a moment before, exploded into panic. This was wrong. She didn't want this. She wanted to live. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow, and in that split second of clarity, she twisted her body, reached out, grasped at nothing. Her hand caught something. A cable, part of the bridge's support structure, barely within reach. Her fingers closed around it reflexively, desperately, and her body jerked to a violent stop. She hung there, one hand gripping the cable, her body dangling over the void, her shoulders screaming in pain. Below her, the water rushed past, indifferent and hungry. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only hold on. Her fingers were slipping. She tried to reach up with her other hand, but the angle was wrong. Her body too heavy, her strength too depleted. She could feel her grip failing, could feel herself starting to slide. She was going to fall anyway. And then she heard it again, barking, frantic, desperate barking. She looked up. On the bridge, just above her, a dog stood at the railing. A pathetic, broken thing, matted fur, visible ribs, a torn ear. It was barking down at her, its whole body shaking with the effort. And in its eyes, she saw something she hadn't expected. Concern. This dying creature, this animal that had every reason to hide, to save itself, to ignore the human world that had given it nothing but pain. It was trying to help her. The absurdity of it cut through her panic. A dog, a stray dog, was trying to save her life. "Help," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible. "Please." The dog barked again. And then it did something that would later seem impossible when she tried to explain it. It ran. The man was driving home from work, late shift at the hospital. He was a nurse, had been for 12 years. He was tired, the kind of bone-deep tired that comes from a double shift, spent watching people suffer, trying to ease pain he couldn't eliminate, making decisions that felt impossible. He wanted to get home, wanted to kiss his sleeping daughter on the forehead, wanted to collapse into bed next to his wife and forget, for a few hours, all the things he couldn't fix. He was stopped at a red light 2 blocks from the bridge when the dog ran in front of his car. He slammed on the brakes. Jesus! The dog stood in the middle of the road, illuminated by his headlights. It was the most pitiful thing he'd ever seen. Half dead, clearly, probably diseased. He should drive around it, keep going, let animal control deal with it tomorrow. But the dog didn't move. It stood there, staring at him, and then it barked. Once, twice, 3 times. And then it ran. Not away, toward the bridge. It stopped, looked back at him, barked again. The man sat there, hands on the steering wheel, trying to process what he was seeing. Was the dog trying to lead him somewhere? That was insane. Dogs didn't do that. Not stray dogs. Not dogs that looked like they'd been kicked 100 times. But the dog barked again, more urgently, and something in the man, the part of him that had spent 12 years learning to read distress signals, to recognize when something was desperately wrong, made him put the car in park. He got out. "What is it, boy?" The dog ran, stopped, looked back. The man followed. They reached the bridge. The dog ran to the railing and barked, its whole body pressed against the metal, looking down. The man's blood went cold. He ran to the railing and looked over. A woman hung there, one hand gripping a cable, her face white with terror and exhaustion, her fingers slipping. Oh my God! He didn't think. Years of emergency training took over. He vaulted over the railing, found a foothold on the support structure, and reached down. "Take my hand!" The woman looked up at him. Her eyes were glazed, unfocused. She was fading. "Take my hand!" he shouted again. "Now!" She reached up. Their fingers touched, slipped. He adjusted his grip, wrapped his hand around her wrist, and pulled. She was heavier than he expected. His shoulder burned. His foothold was precarious. For a terrifying moment, he thought they would both fall. But he held on. He pulled her up, inch by agonizing inch, until she could grab the railing, until he could wrap his other arm around her waist and haul her over onto the pedestrian walkway. They collapsed together on the concrete, both of them, gasping, both of them shaking. The woman was sobbing, great wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than her lungs. "I'm sorry," she kept saying. "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." The man held her, didn't try to quiet her, didn't say it was okay because it wasn't okay. He just held her while she broke apart and put herself back together in the same breath. And through it all, the dog sat nearby, watching, waiting. The ambulance came. The police came. They wrapped the woman in a blanket, asked her questions. She answered in a monotone, still shaking. The man stayed with her. He didn't have to. His shift was over, but he stayed. "You saved my life," she said finally. "That dog saved your life," the man corrected. He looked around. Where? The dog was gone. He had been there just a moment ago, but now the bridge was empty. Just the woman, the man, the paramedics, the flashing lights. The dog had vanished into the night. They found it 3 days later. A jogger noticed it curled up beneath the same bridge, thought it was sleeping at first, then realized it wasn't breathing. Animal control was called. They came and took the body away. No one claimed it. No one mourned it. It was cremated with a dozen other unclaimed animals, its ashes scattered in a field outside the city. No name, no ceremony, no acknowledgement of what it had done. Just another dead stray. But the man heard about it. One of the paramedics from that night mentioned it in passing. They found that dog, the one from the bridge. It was dead. The man felt something crack open in his chest. He went home that night and held his daughter tighter than usual. She squirmed and laughed and asked why Daddy was being silly. He couldn't explain it to her. Couldn't explain that he had seen something that night that he still didn't fully understand. A creature that had every reason to hate the world, to hide, to save itself. But when it heard someone falling, it ran toward the danger instead of away from it. It had used the last of its strength, the last of its life to save a stranger, not because it expected reward, not because it hoped for recognition, but because somewhere, buried beneath the scars and the pain and the betrayal, it still remembered what it felt like to care. The woman was released from the hospital 2 days after they pulled her from the bridge. Psychiatric hold, mandatory counseling, medication adjustments, the usual protocol. She went home to her apartment. It was exactly as she'd left it, clean, tidy, empty. The scheduled email had never sent. She'd been found in time to cancel it. She sat on her couch and stared at the walls and tried to understand what she was supposed to do now. She had tried to die, had wanted to die, had been absolutely certain that death was the only way out. And then a dog, a broken, dying dog that no one loved, had decided her life was worth saving. She cried for hours, not the numb, hollow crying from before, but something rawer, something that felt like grief and gratitude and shame all twisted together. She kept thinking about the dog's eyes, the way it had looked at her, the concern in them. No one had looked at her with concern in so long, and this creature, this animal that had been kicked and starved and abandoned, had seen her and decided she mattered. The thought wouldn't leave her alone. 1 month later, the woman walked into an animal shelter. She didn't know what she was looking for, just knew she needed to be there. The shelter was loud and crowded. Dogs barked from kennels, pressing their faces against the chain link, desperate for attention. She walked slowly down the rows. So many of them. So many abandoned, unwanted, forgotten lives. She stopped at a kennel in the back corner. Inside was an old dog, gray-muzzled, one eye missing. Its body was thin, its movements stiff with arthritis. The placard on the kennel read, "Scheduled for euthanasia, unadoptable." The woman knelt down. The dog looked at her with its one good eye, wary, expecting nothing. "Hey," the woman said softly. "You look like you've had a rough time." The dog didn't move. "Me too," the woman continued. She reached her fingers through the chain link. The dog sniffed them, hesitant, confused by kindness. "I can't bring back the one who saved me," the woman said. Her voice cracked. "But maybe I can save you." She adopted the dog that day, named him River, after the water that almost took her, after the bridge where she learned that life somehow still wanted her to live. River was not an easy dog. He was scared of loud noises, didn't trust easily, had accidents in the house, needed expensive medication for his joints. But the woman didn't care. Every morning she woke up and fed him. Every evening, she walked him slowly around the block, matching her pace to his stiff gait. Every night she sat on the floor next to his bed and told him about her day. And slowly, so slowly she almost didn't notice, something shifted. She started looking forward to mornings again, started planning her days around River's needs instead of her own emptiness, started feeling something other than numb because River needed her, and maybe, she realized, she needed to be needed. 2 years passed. The woman still had bad days, still saw a therapist, still took medication, but she didn't stand on bridges anymore. She started volunteering at the shelter, started fostering dogs that no one else wanted. The old ones, the sick ones, the ones marked unadoptable. She gave them names, gave them soft beds, gave them gentle hands that didn't hurt. Some of them got adopted, some of them didn't. Some of them died in her care, and she mourned every single one, but they died knowing they were loved. The man from the bridge, the nurse who had pulled her up, never forgot that night either. He told the story to his daughter when she got older, told her about the dog that saved a life, told her that sometimes the most broken things are the most brave. She grew up volunteering at shelters too, grew up believing that every life mattered, that kindness, even when it cost you everything, was never wasted. And sometimes, late at night when she couldn't sleep, the woman thought about the dog with no name, wondered if it had known in those final moments that it had mattered, that its pain had not been meaningless, that its one last act of love had rippled outward in ways it could never have imagined. She liked to think it had. She liked to think that somewhere, in whatever comes after, the dog was running free, its leg healed, its ear whole, its body strong and pain-free. She liked to think it was finally home. The truth about goodness. We live in a world that measures worth in strange ways. In money, in beauty, in usefulness, in productivity. We see a homeless person and we look away. We see a stray animal and we call it a nuisance. We see brokenness and we decide it has nothing to offer us. But here's what we forget. Goodness doesn't live in the perfect. It lives in the shattered. Love doesn't come from those who've had it easy. It comes from those who know what it's like to be without it. That dog had every reason to be bitter, to be cruel, to hide in the shadows and let the world eat itself. But when it heard someone falling, it ran. It used its last breath to bark for help, its last strength to bring a stranger running. It saved a life, and in doing so, it gave that life a reason to save others. This is what we don't understand about suffering. It doesn't just break us. It can also make us kinder, more compassionate, more willing to reach for someone else who's drowning because we remember what it felt like to go under. The dog died alone in pain, with no one to witness its final moments. But its death was not meaningless, because the woman it saved went on to save others, and the man who pulled her up went home and held his daughter tighter, and the Kioe's daughter grew up believing in kindness, and the world just slightly became a little less dark. We are all that dog, broken, kicked, forgotten, and we are all that woman, standing on our own bridges, wondering if anyone would notice if we fell. But here's what the story teaches us. You don't have to be whole to be good. You don't have to be healed to help. You don't have to be saved to be a savior. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to let cruelty win. To see someone falling and run toward them instead of away. To bark into the darkness until someone hears. The dog had no name, but it had something more important. It had heart. And that heart, broken as it was, changed everything. If you take nothing else from this story, take this. Your pain does not make you worthless. Your scars do not disqualify you from love. And even if the world has hurt you 1,000 times, you still have the power to be kind. That's the legacy of a nameless dog that everyone hurt. It chose love anyway, and that choice echoed far beyond the moment it was made. So if you're broken tonight, if you're tired, if you're scared, if you're standing on your own bridge wondering if anyone would care if you fell, please hear this. You matter. Your life has weight and meaning and purpose, even when you can't see it. And somewhere out there, someone is alive because you existed. Don't give up. The world needs your bark in the darkness, even if you're scared, even if you're hurt. Especially then, because that's when your voice matters most. In memory of every creature that gave more than it ever received.